This is the way forward. This is how you win on a very local level. 6:05, good morning as we kick it off on a Tuesday. It is great to be here on 95.7 FM KCMO. Make sure you hit that preset on that radio dial if you haven't yet. And thanks as always for streaming us on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Last night, it was about midnight when my phone started blowing up. I was fast asleep. I was in my deep REM sleep at about 12:15 when I got ping, ping, ping. Usually I'm waking up around that time because, well, I've got a kid who's got to go to the bathroom, who's got to eat, who just wants to yell for dad. But last night it was because a handful of you who were at the Lenexa City Council, not the council meeting, but the Planning Commission meeting, let me know that the vote was 8-0 by the Lenexa Planning Commission to move forward with this special use permit to turn the La Quinta Inn and Suites at 95th and I-35 into a low-barrier homeless shelter. 8-0, that vote went down. There were 75 of you who spoke last night at this meeting. I was getting updates throughout the night. At 10:15 last night, they were only on speaker number 32 out of 75 for the Lenexa Planning Commission meeting. And then at about midnight last night, they end up voting on it because all 75 people have to be allowed to speak for a certain period of time. And they end up voting it down 8-0. So that is great news. Now, does it mean that this thing is over? Does it mean that there is no chance of this low-barrier homeless shelter going right at the La Quinta Inn off I-35 and 95th Street? No, that's not what it means. This thing was voted down, but there still is a chance that come September 17th, when the full city council goes to vote, their ultra-liberal mayor will get her arm twisted by people at the county level and will somehow work a deal out to approve this thing. The city council does not have to necessarily do what the planning commission tells it to do. They're just kind of an advisory board, if nothing else. So we're not out of the woods yet on this whole deal, but it was definitely a step in the right direction last night. And the local grassroots engagement on this thing has been incredibly impressive. And I have not seen, and I checked some of the local news sites this morning, and I'll do it again right now. I'll pull them all up. I have not seen any local reporting on this on any of the local sites. I see a video here from Fox 4 that they were having a meeting last night, but I don't see anybody leading with this story this morning. Oh, no, I will give credit where it's due. Woke 41, of course, because I'm sure they're very upset about this. Woke 41. Woke 41. Mark's pumping his fist in there. Woke 41. Come on with me, Mark. Woke 41. Woke 41. Very well done. Woke 41 does have this, of course, the last site for me to check today, it usually is, has this as its lead story. Because, of course, they probably want to call this, mean and nasty and racist and how dare you not build the low-barrier homeless shelter.
How dare you?
So they've actually got this at the top of their page, but for all the wrong reasons. When I look at it, I say this is community engagement. This is community involvement. This is community activation right here. Trust me, November 5th is a big day, right? We're going to elect a new president, and that is going to determine the direction of this country for the next 4 years and potentially many years beyond it. And we will talk plenty about it as we have over the last several months and will over the next 2.5. But these things, like whether or not you are turning La Quinta Inns into homeless shelters right off a major interstate, these things have, in many ways, much more direct impacts on your life. They have much more direct impacts on your day-to-day. Not that who the president is doesn't matter. It clearly does. Look at the last 3.5 years. But this stuff matters just as much, John. And at Lenexa last night, folks showed out in a big way.
I think it's important to keep the context here. We often lose that in these news stories, and convenient facts get glossed over by opposition. So what we're talking about, the low barrier thing, means they can't ask people where they're coming from, correct?
Correct.
And so, therefore, there's really no path to any type of rehabilitation. The fact that it's on I-35 is one thing, and that'd be all right, I guess, for a regular homeless shelter, perhaps. But when you put it right there on I-35 with a low barrier, not asking who you are, where you're coming from, now you're just a glorified roadside park.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Got some indoor rooms.
You're going to be getting dumped off here. That's what's going to be happening. The county.
So that's the issue, putting the two together, low barrier, and then the location. Right?
Yeah, you're right about that.
So,
and that's why it's one of these things that, when the county commission had the opportunity to say, hey, we're going to keep this for Johnson County residents, or we're going to keep this for American citizens, they wouldn't do it.
Right.
The county commission had an opportunity weeks ago to put those barriers in place. And if those barriers had been in place, I believe there would have been a lot less blowback against this thing.
I think so.
But now we sit here in a situation where there's no barrier to entry for this. You are off a major interstate where we know, and there's human trafficking, there's drug trafficking coming up, and people are saying, no, this is not the place for it. And you guys have not put the guardrails in place to protect the entire community. You haven't done it. Why they don't want to do it, I don't know. I don't know if it's some, making sure you get your woke credentials by not having any kind of barrier to entry at a homeless shelter right off I-35 and 95th Street. I don't know. Maybe it's that. But I just sit here and I say, well, we've got places that do it very well that are not funded by the public, like City Union Mission. This project is going to cost the county up to $10 million, and then they're asking every city in Johnson County to kick in thousands of dollars a year to help fund it. And they have not put the right guardrails in place to protect the citizens, the taxpayers they need to be protecting.
There's no guaranteeing your county funding even supports county residents.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to emphasize, keep in mind what low barrier means, because this isn't the only one proposed in the metro area.
It's not.
Yes, and by the way.
That's a good point. This one's getting the most attention right now.
Right.
And it should. And by the way that the people of Lenexa in particular are rising up against this idea is, to me, a positive sign. Because these people love spending your money. And all a lot of people are asking for is, okay, if you're going to spend our money on this stuff, we understand we have a homeless population. Can you at least make sure you're doing it with us in mind? Can you at least make sure the people who are funding it can feel safe or somewhat safe about having these homeless shelters, in some cases in their backyard or across from their small business? And the county basically told you to pound sand. Johnson County basically told you to take a hike. And thankfully, they need Lenexa to approve it. And at least thus far, after the Planning Commission voted 8-0 at midnight last night to turn down this recommended proposal for a special use permit, at least last night, that was a step in the right direction. Now, there is some concern, though, as I noted, that the city council will still go ahead with this. And the rumor is that the county could turn this project into transitional housing, which does not require a special use permit. So that is a way the county could try to get around this. Don't call it a homeless shelter. We'll classify it as a transitional housing, and then they don't even need the city to approve a special use permit. So this thing is not done yet, but last night was a very positive step in the right direction. And if you are a Lenexa resident, well, good on you. Round of applause. Especially if you showed up last night and showed out. Although something tells me those people who showed up and stayed till midnight probably aren't awake yet. So we'll have to bring it up.
A few of them are.
Yeah, maybe a few of them just stayed up all night. They were partying. That's what they were doing last night. Threw a little banger after they got out of that midnight council meeting. 913-408-7957. As we roll through the morning on KCMO, good to be here. Locally as well, the Chiefs being on the ballot in November, that is all but dead. It's done. What happened, we'll tell you next on KCMO. No go on the Chiefs being on the ballot in November for a potential extension of the sales tax for 20 years that would be reduced to 1/4 of a cent and would be reduced by about 10 years and would only be for the Chiefs. The legislature, there were members of the legislature, Sean Smith in particular, who will be on the show in 1 hour, Manny Abarca, a couple of others, who said, why don't we just take this 3/8 cent sales tax that we have been funding and will fund through the end of the decade for the Chiefs and the Royals and reduce it from 3/8 of a cent to 1/4 of a cent. And then we'll reduce it from 30 years or 40 years to 20 years. And we'll give all the money to the Chiefs. I believe that would pass. I believe that's something Jackson County voters would be A-OK with. It would actually reduce their taxes as well. The Chiefs get a little more money, at least on an annual basis, to do what they want to do out at Arrowhead. You keep that team in that location, great spot for the team, and everything's all well and good. Well, didn't get through. They don't have the votes to override Frank's veto. Frank White, of course, being the county chairman. So the vote was 5-4. Now, this has been debated for several weeks. This is something that many on the county commission would like to see happen. But while it passed, it does not pass with enough votes to get through a Frank White veto. So it's not going to happen. And a Chiefs vote is not going to be on your ballot coming up in November. And it's a massive swing and a miss. This was an easy way for everybody to win. This was an easy way for the politicians to say, see, we're looking out for you, the taxpayer. We're actually trying to reduce your taxes. It's then an easy way for the team to stay put where they are, get the money plus a little more, and everybody moves on. Everybody would have won. But, of course, if everybody wins, well, Frank White's probably not happy about that. And the people on the county commission who, for some reason, just don't want to vote for it are those who are loyal soldiers of Frank White. It really is that simple. It's not about anything more than that. It's not about you. It's simply about the people that they want to be friends with on the county commission. And the other thing I heard yesterday is that a lot of it, too, is that they can't stand Manny Abarca. And that part I'm kind of sympathetic to because nobody can really stand that guy at all. I mean, he's the biggest tool on that county commission. In fact, I've heard rumors that he hides in bushes outside of TV stations looking for interviews. I say that tongue-in-cheek, but seriously. So you've got a situation now where some of these folks are loyal to Manny Abarca, and they're loyal to Frank White, and they can't stand Manny Abarca. Now, is that the right way I want our politicians to act? No, I wish they would act in good faith. And even a broken clock is right twice a day. And in this case, Manny's right. Can't believe I'm saying it, but he is. Getting something like this on the ballot would have worked for everybody. And unfortunately, you've got a situation now where this thing is stalled out. Now, Quentin Lucas responded to all this when he heard about the news yesterday. And he insisted, once again, that these teams are going to be playing in Kansas City for years to come. He says, he put on X last night, the Chiefs will be playing in Kansas City, Missouri for a generation to come. The Royals will be playing in Kansas City, Missouri for a generation to come. Don't get distracted by the day-to-day sausage making. Good work is getting done to ensure a positive future for all, he says. Well, once again, I want to see it to believe it. And I agree with that, by the way. I think both teams should remain in Kansas City, Missouri. I believe it makes sense for everybody, the teams and the taxpayer, to keep these two teams in Kansas City, Missouri. But unfortunately, when you've got an incompetent county government like we have in Jackson County, I don't feel great about it. Now, what it looks like is going to happen is the Royals are going to try to get away with doing some deal with the city that has no involvement with the county, because there is no deal to be had. Frank doesn't like the Royals. We know what the pettiness is there. So the team has basically said, we'll try to do some deal directly with the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So what are they looking at now? Well, the Royals apparently are still looking at this stadium site in Washington Square Park near Union Station and Crown Center.
Beautiful 5 acres.
Well, thank you for that, John. Gosh, we have spent too much time together because you're reading my mind. We did that. That was totally unplanned right there by John Anthony. But when I saw the Fox 4 story, It said Washington Square Park is a 5-acre open area with grass, trees, and walking paths. It sits 1 block east of Union Station, 1 block north of Crown Center. It's been a hot spot in Kansas City sports for years. And my first thought was, you got to be kidding me. 5 acres? 5 acres is where they're trying to squeeze in a baseball stadium. Now, John, I went back and I looked it up. The East Village site was 27 acres that they were looking at originally.
Okay.
And the spot they ended up picking down there where they were going to be, by Crossroads, that was a 17.3 acre site. So now they're trying to whittle this thing into a 5-acre area in Washington Square Park. What are we putting in, a Little League ballpark?
I did see a quote about making the park fit the city like Chicago, a.k.a. Wrigley, and Boston, a.k.a. Fenway. Those are the 2 oldest parks in baseball, I believe.
Yes.
Surely.
Yes.
And they were built just to put there when baseball wasn't that big a deal. Just drew some guys out to smoke cigars in the afternoon back in the 20s.
And people were a lot thinner back then, too. The seats, are a little snug when you go to some of those ballparks.
Well, like I say, it wasn't a big deal. It's like, okay, well, we'll just put it in this empty lot.
Yeah.
Whatever the dimensions are is what they are. That's why it's $297 in the old Yankee Stadium, blah, blah, blah.
Well, we could have a, 220-foot right field porch.
I wondered.
Here in Kansas City.
You can get into the lobby of the Hyatt. That's a home run.
Right? That could help Bobby Witt Jr. catch up to Aaron Judge real fast on the home runs.
Bobby Witt's going to be the first, 60-60 player. 60 home runs, 60 stolen bases. Oh, my gosh. That is a really, really tight squeeze. 5 acres for a baseball stadium. So, by the way, how are you going to get to and from the stadium? Well, Fox 4 reports here there are 19,000 parking spaces within 4 blocks. Okay, all right. Now, how many of them are currently being used? I'd like to know. But then, this is maybe just the thing that made me fall out of my chair. The proposal estimates 5,000 people would use the streetcar that would be adjacent for transportation. All right, the game ends at 9:25 at night. You'll be home via streetcar by the time you're done waiting in River Market close to midnight. What kind of ridiculous idea is that? Clearly, nobody who's ever tried to use the streetcar for transportation, as I have when I live downtown, thinks this is a real idea. There's no way you can have ever used the streetcar after a big event at Power and Light and feel like that is a legitimate option for mass transit to move people around. It's not. It's a toy trolley. That's what it is.
Be like the traffic scene in the beginning of the movie Office Space.
Yeah.
Guy's changing lanes trying to get ahead, and the guy in the walker keeps cruising by him.
Oh, ain't that the truth? So I don't think the Royals have any idea what they're doing. But this looks less realistic by the day. 913-408-7957. A new Trump ad that is hitting home very well we'll get to coming up. I love seeing new ads because oftentimes, we're sitting here in Kansas and Missouri, unfortunately not a swing state on either side of our state line. But when you get to see the ads that are airing in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, it's fun. And now thanks to social media, we get to see those ads. And this is a new ad that was dropped by Donald Trump's team yesterday, and it is very effective. It's clips from that speech Kamala Harris gave, like 2 weeks ago. She gave that speech where she was talking about the price of everything going up as if like she has not been in office for the last 3.5 years and she's not, effectively the incumbent. And it's using quotes and clips from that speech with old quotes and clips of Kamala Harris talking about how great Bidenomics is. It's a highly effective ad, and here's what it sounds like.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Everyday prices are too high. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes. That is called Bidenomics. A loaf of bread cost 50% more today. Ground beef is up almost 50%. There's not much left at the end of the month. Bidenomics is working. The price of housing has gone up. It feels so hard to just be able to get ahead. And we are very proud of Bidenomics.
That is perfect. 30 seconds, right to the point. It's even better when you watch it. I will post it momentarily on X at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. But that is a very effective ad. It's not about Trump. It's got nothing to do with Trump. It is basically, hey, let's not forget, I know she's running away from the last 3.5 years, but, she has been, and she still is right now, the sitting vice president. She has been the deciding vote in the United States Senate on key pieces of legislation that have helped cause inflation. That's been her MO because the VP will break a 50-50 stalemate in the U.S. Senate. She is the tie-breaking vote. And she has been that tie-breaking vote on many occasions for the United States Senate. So this notion that she's kind of getting away with this whole thing of like, I'm just a visionary, and she's kind of running as if Donald Trump is not, or as if Donald Trump is the incumbent. And it's crazy that they're getting away with it. But by the way, media's not calling him out. Hasn't done a sit-down interview in 38 days since the old switcheroo. So why not keep gaslighting the American people? Now, here's the question. Are the American people actually falling for it? Well, the polling would suggest that, yes, they are, right? If you see the polling, she is leading in a lot of the polls. But I talked to somebody yesterday in Michigan, and this is somebody who's been around Michigan news and politics for a very long time. And I'm like, what's going on up there? Like, I'm just out of curiosity. I left it open-ended. I let him take it whatever direction he wanted. And he said to me, no one knows. He goes, no one has any idea what's going on. The polling is still not nearly as accurate as it should be. People don't pick up the phones. If they do, they're skeptical. So no one knows what's going on. But he said, overall, I think it is going to be a coin flip is what he told me on either side. So still, I mean, Donald Trump was beating Joe Biden fairly handily if you look at some of the polling, and now you sit there and you say it's closer. There's no doubt about it. But it still feels like we're watching a honeymoon phase for Kamala Harris, a sugar high for the Kamala Harris campaign that at some point has to pop. And what has to happen? Well, these two have to get on a debate stage. That's what has to happen. And they're supposed to get on the debate stage 2 weeks from tonight. But what has magically happened over the last 24 hours? Well, what's happened is the Harris campaign wants to change the rules. The Harris campaign now does not want Donald Trump to have a muted microphone. That's what came out yesterday from Politico. So for months, Joe Biden was not going to debate Donald Trump unless his microphone was muted. Trump agrees to do this muted microphone deal. Then the first debate happens. Joe Biden falls flat on his face. He drops out of the race, and Trump performs pretty well, knowing his mic is going to be muted, and he can't just talk over people. And now the Harris campaign is like, well, we actually don't want that. So they're trying to change the rules 2 weeks before, and they also want them both to be sitting down, and they also want them to both have notes. Now, why would that be the case? Well, we know what's going on with the notes. Kamala Harris can't really speak off the cuff. She's got to have everything pre-prepared. She's got to have something in front of her. So they don't trust her to go out there and make any sense without notes. So they want her to have notes. And the sitting down thing is, I think, in part an optics thing, largely. I don't think it's like Kamala's worried about her tired legs. I think it's an optics thing. Listen, people, when they're looking for a leader has a certain look. If you look at data, it shows that oftentimes CEOs are taller than the average person. Like the average CEO is like 6 foot or taller or something like that when you look up that data. In part because, whether it's right or not, how we pick leaders, how you look matters. How you look makes a difference. And when people are standing up there and they're looking at Donald Trump, who's 6'3", maybe he's down to 6'2" since he's almost 80 years old. But, he has a look. And when you put him side by side with Kamala Harris, that's a look that people are going to say, who do I want to be that leader of the free world? Especially in the perilous times that we find ourselves in. Trump has that look. That's not me being a Trump sycophant at all. I mean, Obama had that look. But especially when compared to Kamala Harris, Trump's got the look. He does. And he's like a foot taller than her as well. I think I looked it up last night. She's 5'4". Like, height matters, okay? I'm sorry if that offends you. That's human nature. I don't care what DEI training you want to send me into. Height matters. People care about that stuff when they're analyzing somebody for a position like this. That's why they want them seated. So the Harris team is now acting as if Donald Trump is the chicken in all this. This was put up on the Kamala Harris HQ X page last night.
On a different front, Axios this week.
Nope, here it is. Hang on one second. Here we go.
But because they already know everything. They'll say, Trump's, not doing the debate. That's the same thing they'll say now. I mean, right now I say, why should I do a debate? I'm leading in the polls. And everybody knows her. Everybody knows me.
But when I looked at the hostility of that, I said, why am I doing it? Let's do it with another network.
So they put a chicken sound behind Donald Trump talking, implying that he's too chicken to debate her. No. I know the media is going to carry your water, but let's be very clear. Kamala Harris basically said to Donald Trump when the switch happened, so we're all good. We're going to agree to the original terms of the debate, right? And Trump was like, cool. All right. Yeah, I agree. And then Kamala says, great. We're not debating the debates anymore. See you on September 10th. And then after a couple of weeks, Kamala's like, actually, we want to change the rules. And Trump's like, no, you can't do that. We already signed off on them. And then Kamala says now, why are you so afraid to debate me, huh? That's what's going on here. 913-408-7957. And there's something else that she wants to do on the debate stage, which is why she doesn't want Donald Trump's microphone muted. I'll tell you what that is next on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming on the iHeart app. So why would Kamala Harris magically now want the microphones to not be muted when the candidates are not speaking, coming up on September 10th in the debate that these two are supposed to put on? Why might that be? Well, maybe it's because Kamala Harris's team realizes that their best opportunity to have a moment against Donald Trump, and that's what these debates often come down to, moments, is to get him to interrupt her and for her to put on the phony girl boss routine like she did against Mike Pence 4 years ago in their VP debate.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate.
That's the moment that she wants. She wants the big orange mean man to be talking over her because he can't help himself. And then for her to, in turn, be able to have this line of, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
How dare you?
Don't you interrupt me. Hear me roar. That's what she wants. That's it. And that's why her team yesterday magically decided that they want to change the rules of the debate. Their best bet is for Donald Trump to be unhinged and to be unable to control himself and to talk over her. And by the way, they are right to feel that way. Some of you are sitting there on the text line right now at 913-408-7957, and you're saying, give them whatever rules they want. Just get her on that debate stage. No, I'm not doing it. They agreed to rules. And by the way, I don't trust Donald Trump without his mic being muted. Trump was controlled, relatively speaking, in that debate against Joe Biden because he knew he'd look like a fool if he tried to talk over Joe without his microphone on. It forced Donald Trump to be somewhat in control because he didn't want to look like a horse's butt by trying to talk when the microphone wasn't on. Trump is an optics guy. He's a TV guy. He gets how that would look if he was trying to talk and his mic wasn't on. So he was in control. I don't trust him. I don't. And I readily admit that, John. I just don't trust him if that microphone is not muted.
Well, it's not him you don't trust. It's the opposition because, she's not going to stick to the points even if she believes what she's saying. And he were simply to point out the contradictions in her policy, she'll still do the personal attack.
Well, she will, but
right?
I don't trust him. I don't trust him to not talk over her.
Right. No,
I don't.
I agree with you, especially because she will try to bait him into a personal thing rather than a, what's the word I'm looking for? Politics. I mean, issues debate.
Well, yeah.
Right.
But
you're right.
But
You're
I don't
right.
trust him to even make a counterpoint after she's done talking. He will try to talk over her. That's what he does. Yeah. So it's not even about, she's definitely going to bait him, and I think he's going to take the bait because he can't help himself. So if I'm Trump, no, you agreed to these rules. These are the rules that you guys wanted. And now, with 2 weeks to go, you want to change the rules. That's not how this works. Let's go to Shonda, Overland Park, or Olathe, excuse me. Hey, Shonda, you're on KCMO.
Hey, Fee, appreciate the show. I totally agree with you on that. It's going to be difficult for him to contain himself because she is going to bait him. But we all remember when Clint Eastwood had the empty chair. President Trump could just have the empty podium because Kamala is really nothing but it's a pantsuit. And it's going to be something to see. But I tell you, she's not the only one that's chicken. Sharice Davids will not debate Dr. Reddy. So we've got that locally as well. And I say he stands up, let her sit down. That's fine. Who cares? But I appreciate you guys.
Well, she definitely, thank you, Shonda. She definitely doesn't want that. Definitely doesn't want to sit if Trump's standing. But as for locally, Sharice Davids, Prashanth Reddy, I'll get some color on that here in the days ahead and figure out where that potential debate stands. John's in Independence. John, you're on KCMO. Go ahead, buddy.
You know what amazes me is that, like, just about a month and a half ago, everybody wanted to dump her from the ticket because she was a drag for Biden. But now all of a sudden, here she is, and she's large and in charge without one vote being cast. And now they're wanting to switch horses in midstream with this debate thing about the mics on and off. I still don't think that she's got what it takes to do any of this stuff because I think the sugar high is about ready to pop here pretty soon. And when that happens, then it's going to be, Trump is going to be, riding high in the polls and probably end up getting reelected. But in the meantime, we have to put up with all this nonsense. And it's really starting to be it's aggravating for people who pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really getting sick and tired of it myself, and I have been for years. But
hang in there, John. Hang in there, buddy, okay? Don't worry. We'll keep you entertained, and we'll keep you level-headed throughout the next couple of months, all right, buddy?
I would appreciate it, Pete. Thank you.
You bet, John. We're here for you, my man. Don't worry. She is a paper tiger. Everybody knows it. And that's why she now suddenly realizes, crap, I don't want to get on that debate stage. How do I get out of it? And if I can't get out of it, how do I set myself up to have a moment that the media will carry my water with? And that's why she wants Trump to be unhinged without a muted microphone. Sherry in Overland Park. Got a minute, Sherry? What's happening?
Yeah, at first I was against that muted mic, and you were a proponent for it, and so I love it now. I think you were exactly right. That worked well. And the more he talks, the less she has to because she can't come up with facts and figures. And then she can play the victim card. It's a win-win for her to have that mic off. And you guys were right about that. So keep up the good work, and hopefully Trump sticks to his guns. No mic.
Well, I just remember, and I'll never forget, Sherry, thank you very much, how poorly Trump did in that first debate against Biden. Remember that with Chris Wallace, where he just couldn't shut up. He had diarrhea of the mouth. And I remember sitting there yelling at my television, saying, shut up! Shut up! Joe Biden's a fool. Let him look like a fool. And he wouldn't do it. And he just looked unhinged and out of control. And, he played right into his opponent's hands. This past June, he knows his mic is not going to be on if he tries to interrupt. And he just stood there. And Joe Biden just spoke. And Joe Biden spoke some more. And then he buried himself. And Joe Biden is now just a body without a human in it. And is going through the motions. and is no longer the nominee. Kamala Harris needs to be the person who just talks. And my fear is that if Trump puts himself in a situation where he's all worked up, he's all jazzed up, and he can't stop talking over her, he will have an issue like what he had against Joe Biden back in 2020. Mute the mics, stand your ground, don't move on. Don't move off of it. You've got to be kidding me. There's flip-flopping in politics, and then there's this. Axios reporting this morning, this just coming down, that Kamala Harris has flip-flopped on the issue of building a wall on the southern border.
I'm getting pissed now.
Here's the story. If she's elected president, Axios writes, Kamala Harris pledges to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the wall along the southern border, a project she once opposed and called un-American during the Trump administration. They're right here. It's the latest example of Harris flip-flopping on her past liberal positions, such as supporting Medicare for all and banning fracking, proposals that aides say she now is against. Harris is embracing a more hawkish immigration policy as Donald Trump's campaign spends tens of millions of dollars attacking her about the border. I don't think there's been a bigger political fraud in my lifetime than Kamala Harris. With each passing day, there's something else that she comes out on, or her staff claims she comes out on, that is completely different from beliefs she had a couple of years ago. This whole thing, I mean, she is the biggest empty pantsuit in political history. She makes Hillary Clinton look like a person of strong convictions and reasonable values. This is insane. I want to play some audio of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz talking about Donald Trump and building a wall along our southern border to, protect our citizens, make sure that, we're creating a process that's right for the right people who want to come here the right way. Here's about a minute or so of that audio.
We don't need to build a wall. And by definition, just plain speak, basic English language definition, it is not an emergency.
He talks about this wall. I always say, let me know how high it is. If it's 25 feet, then I'll invest in the 30-foot ladder.
To suggest that we have to build a wall across our southern border because there are terrorists who are trying to invade the country, it couldn't be farther from the truth. It couldn't be farther from the truth.
Out of the terror arrests across the country, we've learned several men with suspected ties to ISIS living in the U.S. have been taken into custody.
Sources familiar with the matter tell us the men crossed the southern border, some over a year ago.
Almost 100 people on the terrorist watch list were released into the U.S. by the Biden administration during a 3-year period.
Tonight, an alarming development in the border crisis. Among the record number of migrants crossing the southern border was a member of an Afghan terror organization.
We are learning that under the Biden and Harris administration, the Border Patrol agents encountered at least 375 illegal migrants on the terror watch list right on the southern border. But what's more shocking is at least 99 of these individuals were actually released into American communities, includes at least 2,000 Afghan nationals, 33,000 Chinese nationals, 551 Iranian nationals, 520 Syrian nationals, and 3,000 Uzbek nationals.
To suggest that we have to build a wall across our southern border because there are terrorists who are trying to invade the country, it couldn't be farther from the truth.
What an empty pantsuit. I'm picking and choosing my words very carefully because this is just, it's so disingenuous. It is so frustrating to see somebody like Donald Trump, who, whether you love him or, you're like, yeah, he's okay. Regardless of what you think about him, his policies domestically, foreign affairs-wise, on the border, were very good for America. And especially his policies on the border. He was called a racist. He was called some nasty, nasty things by people like Kamala Harris. And 3.5 years after she's in the White House as the VP, and she's going around allowing 10 to 12 million people to come into the country illegally, including known terrorists on the terrorist watch list. Suddenly now it's like, maybe the guy Trump was kind of right about some things. In which case, why don't we just elect him? Since, he did the job, did it pretty well. All right, it came with some baggage, no doubt about that, but did it pretty well. And you're now advocating for policies that you previously called inhumane and racist and the whole 9 yards, but now you're like, actually, there were some good ideas there. Same thing with not taxing tips, child tax credits, all these ideas that she's just taken from Trump, more or less. So why don't we just vote for that guy? There's an idea,
Such a nice man.
So something that's going to happen and already is happening and will continue to happen in the weeks ahead is they're going to have to go back to the well on abortion and democracy. Kamala's going to pretend to moderate on some of these other issues, tax policy, border issues, things like that. They're going to go back to the well on democracy. I think that January 6th is going to come up, and that was a horrific day for America. No one's defending January 6th, but it's also not the thing that people should vote on. Because basically what their case is going to be is, well, if you vote for Donald Trump, you support January 6th. And it's a totally disingenuous argument to make. But it's all they're going to have. So they're going to basically what they're saying is you have to give the United States government over to far left liberals because January 6th was a really bad day. That's basically going to be their argument. You must hand over the White House to the most liberal candidate at the top of a ticket in modern American history because, well, January 6th. And it's like, no, for those of us who can think beyond 2 inches below the surface, that's not true. I don't have to hand over the government to a bunch of radical liberals because January 6th was really bad. January 6th was really bad. January 6th was an embarrassment for Donald Trump. But in an election where you get two options, right? In a binary election, and that's what they all are. You got binary choices here. You're telling me that basically I have to acquiesce all traditional American values, give them all up because of one really bad day? I'm not doing it. And by the way, tens of millions of Americans aren't doing it either. And I would like you to keep browbeating people over January 6th. It may work for some, but in the end, people are going to say, what do you stand for? What are your values? What do you want to do? And if suddenly you're moderating on things like the border wall and you're saying maybe actually a wall kind of works, maybe it actually kind of makes sense. We were told it was very antiquated a few years ago to even think about building a wall as if it was like, the Great Wall of China or something like that. No, it was part of border policy that served purpose. And guess what? Where the wall's up, it generally works. I know.
Talk about a bombshell.
But this whole thing of like, well, you're against democracy if you vote for Trump. It's like, no, I just don't want to hand over the government to a bunch of people that are way out of the mainstream with their liberal ideology. And that's what they're going to ask you to do coming up. That's what's going to happen.